taking the first action.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Taking the First Action, your public health show where we talk about different public health issues affecting our communities, our families, and everyone out there. I'm your presenter, Teddy. We've had a series of episodes on the rights of persons with disabilities. We've had a look at the employment rights of persons with disabilities, where we discussed fully the potential of people with disabilities when it comes to employment opportunities, the need to give them a chance to lead a decent life by offering them opportunities to work like any other ordinary person. And today we are going to look at inclusive education, still focusing on persons with disabilities. But what exactly do we mean when we talk of inclusive education? We are very much aware that in this country we have children who are disabled or who are physically challenged, and we have children who are normal, who may not have any physical challenges on them. But both have to access education as a right anyway. When we talk about inclusive education, we are looking at a situation whereby both children, normal and disabled, are able to learn in an environment that is supportive of each other's needs. With an inclusive education system, we are able to break the barriers that would hinder the realization of the full potential of persons with disabilities. Remember that children who learn together learn to live together, and children who live together learn to create long-lasting relationships. But what is the situation like in Uganda, and how inclusive are the schools in this country? This and many more on Taking the First Action. Education is one of the facets of any country that enhances economic growth and development. And above all, it is a social service as well as a right that all citizens of a country should access. It enables all children gain access to knowledge, skills, and information that will prepare them to contribute to the growth of communities and workplaces. This is highlighted in one of the Millennium Development Goals that stress the need for universal primary education. And Uganda is one of the developing countries that have instituted measures aimed at this goal. Schools tend to be a hub for all types of children and from all walks of life. And it is in schools where children learn to live as a community and where they accept the differences between them. Uganda has a proportion of its population being children with disabilities. As children in school, disabled or not, one would expect them to play, read, laugh together, which in the end builds their self-esteem. But again, there's a lot to ponder about, given that most young children have varying levels of awareness of different types of disabilities. One would then question, what attitudes do able-bodied children have towards those who move, think, behave, speak, communicate, or learn differently than the norm?
If I see a child who doesn't know how to smile and she has one arm, I could pray for her.
Difficult child, like when he's on a chair or she's on a chair or he can't walk, I could help her or him, because in this school we are told to behave nicely and love each other, because we should get punishments if we don't behave nicely. And if we don't behave nicely, God won't love us. Like when someone is talking to a child who can't talk and then they shout at that child, I could just go and tell that person that, please may you stop shouting at that child.
When I see a child who is lame, I will help her.
Some people in my class abuse me that my hand is lame, so I want the teachers to help me.
I told my aunt that when I grow up, I'll build a house for the disabled people and help them.
It may not only be the children to think about, but teachers too. One may wonder what kinds of reactions to and interactions between disabled and able-bodied children can teachers in early childhood educational settings expect to encounter.
I would expect these children to learn each one's need, help each other, of course with the help of the teacher. I would expect them to be helping each other to understand the other one's disability, and also the disabled children respect the fact that they are disabled and they need help from their other children. So I would expect these children to ask, the disabled children, to ask the normal children for help. That is if they could be able to talk or sign. And I would also expect the other normal children to learn the language that the other children use.
Owing to lack of knowledge, educational access and technology, disabled children were initially treated as unwanted and segregated from other children. To date, we are seeing a lot of efforts being done by the government and other non-government organizations in promoting access to education for persons with disabilities, both in general public schools and what is commonly known as schools for persons with special needs. However, efforts are being geared by human rights activists towards having children with disabilities attend the same schools as non-disabled children. But what are the likely challenges when it comes to inclusive schools?
First of all, I've participated a lot in trying to see that we have instructional material which are sensitive people with disabilities, and especially children with disabilities in school. Unfortunately, the Department of Disability is hampered with budget cuts. They are not so much that level. But I'm aware that they are able to get some materials like Braille. They are able to have sign language dictionaries. They are able to facilitate some kind of training to teachers to do these materials from the local environment. But the challenge we have is the manpower, the human resource to utilize these things. You will reach a school and have only one teacher with sign language, special needs education. You don't expect the teacher to run from P1 to P7 under UPE, because he might be the only one, or she might be the only one who is aware of what to do with the children with special needs. You find that the human resource is also not so relevant to all the disabilities. For example, I could be an expert in visual impairment, not in sign language interpretation. I might not be able to handle a child with multiple disabilities as a teacher. So these children go to school. Yes, we have the instructional material could be there, but who is going to translate the instructional materials to a procedure that helps these children to benefit from the instructional material? So, and that's why we have a lot of dropouts of children with learning difficulty.
Inclusion of disabled children in mainstream schools is one way of building the minds of young people to accept and appreciate the differences that exist between a normal person and a physically challenged person. The basic premise is that the school should meet the educational needs of all children, irrespective of their disabilities or limitations. And there's need to remember that diversity brings strength to all living systems. The daily reality for most children with a disability is that they are often condemned to a poor start in life and deprived of opportunities to develop to their full potential and to participate in society. They are routinely denied access to the same opportunities for early, primary and secondary education, or life skills and vocational training, or both that are available to other children. They either have no voice or their views are discounted. Making education programs for disabled children would therefore be an integral part of the general education system rather than a system within general education. This, however, changes the dynamics of teaching and learning. Discriminatory attitudes towards disabled children persist in society because of lack of awareness and information and little or no experience of living closely with disabled persons, and this is ingrained in children at a tender age. It is difficult to break down these attitudinal barriers, but experience has shown that within the right context, children can be more accepting of difference than adults. Children are our future parents, teachers, lawyers, doctors, and policymakers. If they go to school with disabled children, they will learn not to discriminate, and if we all agree that separate is not equal, what about our children with special needs being denied the right to a free and public education or being placed in separate, segregated classrooms? Some head teachers I spoke to were amenable to the concept of inclusive education, but didn't feel they had the resources or training to implement it effectively.
Inclusive education would be so ideal for Uganda, our country. Reasons: when these children are together, they learn so many things. They learn how to associate with each other. This is the time when everyone gets to know, how does this one eat? How does this one play with the other? How does he smile? How does he look? Because we have got different types of disability. We have those who have sight problems. We have those who have the speech problems. We have those who are physically lame. And when they come together and the normal ones look at these ones, like, they want to see it that they are very normal just as they are. They associate in the normal way. So in this, in most cases, we avoid discrimination. This child thinking the other one, because there is no arm or the arm is folded, cannot do anything. We want to bring them together in order to perform what is supposed to be performed, because they are all human beings. But what comes as a challenge in most cases, we have, like I said, the limited staff, the trained personnel, then the facilities. It's quite expensive. Buying the facilities that will educate these children fully, like the other normal children, are very, very expensive. Putting up the structures is also another hard thing, because these are children who would be in a place that is isolated by others. But here, when we are together, they learn everything and they feel everything is normal. Life goes on normally.
Schools should become more accessible to disabled children and responsive to their needs. Research shows that most students learn and perform better when exposed to the richness of the general education curriculum, as long as the appropriate strategies and accommodations are in place. On the other hand, inclusion enhances learning for students both with and without special needs. They learn and use their learning differently. The goal is to provide all students with the instruction they need to succeed as learners and achieve high standards alongside their friends and neighbors. Though of recent, special classes and schools have been created for students with special needs like the blind, the deaf, and the mentally retarded, special educators feel that if they can just teach these students separately in smaller groups, they can help them to catch up. However, the reality is, students in segregated special education classes have fallen further and further behind. Over time, we've learned that inclusion education is a better way to help our students succeed. It is unfortunate that in Uganda, we have seen schools rejecting people with disabilities and cases taken to court for denial of what is supposed to be a right to education and a chance to equal education opportunities.
I could share lots of cases, but the one that come to my mind is one case that we handled with one of the universities. I'll not mention the university, but this student applied to our university normally like any other student, and she was admitted. And then when she showed up, the university did not know that she actually had a disability, and they said, no, we can't take you on, because she was a wheelchair user, and they said the lecture rooms are upstairs, the classes, I think where they stay or something. I think the classes mainly were upstairs. And then they told her that she couldn't get into the university because of that. She had an admission already, but because now she appeared and they saw her disability. So this young lady was dismissed from the university on those grounds. Yeah. And she came to us. At that time, we were starting out. What we did was just to write to the university and, put down some of the provisions of the law and tell them that what they were doing was actually not legal, and that we would take legal action against them if they didn't allow this young lady to go on with her studies. And they did take her back.
Though in some instances, little blame may be placed on schools, since the environment may not be conducive for persons with disabilities. But on the other hand, the government should put in place laws governing the type of infrastructure necessary to create an inclusive education system. The role of inclusive education in integrating people with disabilities in academic settings is a human rights issue which cannot be ignored by authorities of primary and high schools, colleges and universities, and any other places where education is provided. Despite provisions for inclusive education in human rights instruments, full integration remains elusive, and people with disabilities continue to be along the least educated groups. An inclusive education system is one way of eliminating discrimination and barriers to realization of the full potential of persons with disabilities.
We are advocating for inclusive education, and I 100% support inclusive education. I have seen people with disabilities that have gone through inclusive education and those that have gone through the so-called special schools. And clearly I can tell you that those who have been to inclusive education are much better people than those that have gone to special schools. And we would like the government to create an inclusive society for disabled people. As a child, if you grow up with other children, they might run the first day they see you, but they'll get used to you, they'll be friendly to you, and you will associate with people without disabilities. And because we live in a community, we don't live in a vacuum. You grow up and people have seen you and they know Laura has a disability, so and so has a disability, but they associate with you. In fact, I think we wouldn't be having issues of employment, all these perceptions, if the society was inclusive. And I know that we can never make special communities. We cannot make special universities for disabled people. So it's important that government moves from this whole idea of special schools, school for the deaf, school for the blind, school for, physically handicapped, and just focus on putting their resources into the inclusive school. Like I said in Kisubi, it was an inclusive school. And it's just a matter of making a few accommodations for the disabled students that are going to join that school. And it was very easy to interact with other children. They get used to you, they know, they give you help, they assist you where necessary. But it is very difficult for you to come out of a community, for example, of the blind, and be able to interact with a bigger community when you're maybe seeking for employment at that level, when you're joining university, it becomes very difficult. So what we advocate for right now is that government should put their focus on inclusive education.
Children without special needs often become aware of the needs of other children in an inclusive classroom or setting. It's at this stage that they try to understand, to gain a skill and understand the behavior and how they should respond to their fellow friends who may have special needs. This is one way of accepting them, being tolerant to them, and appreciating the differences that exist between them. This is one way of how we can eliminate discrimination of persons with disabilities, especially when it comes to education. We need an inclusive education kind of setting to enable every child relate to one another and accept the differences that may exist between them. Thank you for watching this program, and please do not forget to follow us on our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/takingthefirstaction, or you may give us a call on 0773 132 772. Thank you for being with us. See you next time. Bye-bye.